Okay, so today we are just going to talk a little bit about um, words. So today we're just going to talk about simplifying exponential expressions. So we've talked about multiplying, dividing, taking powers of powers, but now we're going to talk about kind of throwing it all together. So when we throw it all together, we actually separate it into its individual pieces. So like on this first example where we have 3x to the fourth y to the fifth is z divided by x squared y squared, what we actually want to do is to separate this into its individual pieces. So the 3's out front, the x's, the y's, and then the z's. So we're going to look at each of these individually. So 3 divided by nothing is still 3. So we're left with 3. Then we have our x's. X to the fourth divided by x squared. We need to subtract those exponents. So 4 minus 2 is 2, so we're left with x squared. And then for our y's, we have y to the fifth divided by y squared. So we're going to subtract those exponents as well. So we're left with y to the third. And then z has nothing below it, it's just its own thing, so we copy the z down. And we're left with 3x squared y to the third z for our answer. So we're doing the same thing we've been doing, we're just piecing it all together and doing it all in one problem. So on this second one, we have 4x to the fourth y to the fifth, all to the second power, which means this second power goes to each individual term. So our 4, our x, and our y. So our first thing we got to do is add 4. So 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16. So we're going to have 16. You know, let's copy it down. So let's do, we have 4 squared, and then we have, let's separate it off with parentheses, then we have x to the fourth to the second, then we have y to the fifth to the second. So we're going to conquer each of these individually. So 4 squared is 16. X to the fourth to the second would be x to the 4 times 2, so x to the eighth. And then we're going to do the same thing with y. So we have y to the fifth to the second power, so y to the 5 times 2, which would be 10. Okay, so when we have an exponent outside, we have to use that exponent on each individual term, so each bit that's sectioned off. So, and then our final quick example would be 2xy to the second times 3x to the third y to the seventh. So once again, we're going to section this off. We have our first piece is the number out front, then we have our x's, then we have our y's. So number out front, x's, y's. So our numbers out front, 3 and 2, since these are multiplying, 3 times 2 is 6. So we have 6 for our first. Then x times x to the third, which we could rewrite x as x to the first, since there's no exponent up there originally. So we're going to do x to the first times x to the third, which would be x to the fourth, because we're adding those exponents. And then we have y squared times y to the seventh. So when we add those exponents, we have y to the ninth. So long story short, what we're going to do is we're going to section it off into its terms. So our regular numbers that are usually out front, and then our individual bases. So if we have a base of x, we keep the base x's together. Base y, we keep the base y's together. Base z, we keep the base z's together. And that's the same for any variable. If you have questions,